Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Robert Chappell, Executive Editor of Madison365. I apologize for the technical difficulty there. If you noticed, we went live a few minutes ago, and we went live on a black screen. My camera decided not to work, so I decided to give it a little reboot.
Good afternoon.
And all is now well, apparently, at least on the technical end here. The news I have for you today is not very good. From a spreading of coronavirus perspective. It is we only had we're only reporting one fatality today, so that's the that's the bright spot, I guess. It's hard to say one person dying is good news, but when we've been averaging 6 or 7 a day for the past week, just to have one to report, which took place in Milwaukee County, is not so bad. But the statistics on the spread of the infection today is very bad. Now we're going to go through these numbers, and then I will, if anybody has questions or comments, we'll take those at the end, just as we have for the last couple of days, just to make this a little bit easier viewing after the fact for those that aren't watching live, to be able to keep up. So, what are the big numbers? The big numbers are that the positive test rate today, one of the problems today is that we only have 6,000 tests reported. Actually, about 6,100. And we have 685 positive tests. And that is a 11.23% positive test rate. So, yeah, 685 is a smaller number than it's been, but we did a lot fewer tests, and the percentage of those tests that came back positive is significantly higher than it has been for a long time. A couple times in the past month and a half, going back to the early July, we've been over 10% on a particular day. We have not been over 11% since April 22nd. And back then, we were reporting 225 new cases. So that, we were back in April. You remember we were doing, maybe 1,500, 2,000 tests a day. And our positive tests, our positive cases count was like the April 24th was like the highest we'd ever seen, at like 360 or something like that, right? So our raw numbers are much bigger every day right now. So 685 is still a big number, but to be at 11.25% is pretty bad for the day. That gives us a 7-day average. So basically, what 11.25% today, the tests were positive today. Over the past week, 7.5% of all tests have been positive. You really want both of those numbers to be below 3, right? If you can keep the 7-day average below 10, that means we're kind of in that mitigation phase. But you feel like 6 months into this thing, we should be past the mitigation phase and into the suppression phase. Should be on the downside of the curve. We are not on the downside of the curve yet. That's the unfortunate thing. Okay, our total case count right now is 65,741. Of those, 8,700 are considered active, meaning they either have been sort of certified symptom-free or the infection was diagnosed more than 30 days ago. So that's 100 fewer than Friday, so that's another kind of bright spot in the data. As I mentioned, we had one fatality. The number of people who've tested positive but then died of other causes remains at 18. So that's a small, relatively small number that is not counted in the fatality count, which our total COVID fatality count right now is 1,038. 7-day average of new cases is now 741. 14-day average, if you're thinking back to a couple of weeks ago when we were hitting 1,000 cases a day for a couple of times, the 14-day average is 801. And I mentioned the positive percent rate over the past 7 days, 7.46%. We've averaged 6 deaths per day for the past week, 7 per day for the past 2 weeks. 90 fatalities in the past 2 weeks. We'll talk about some localities and one or two other statistical things, and then we'll take any questions that you have. As usual, Milwaukee County led the way here with 158 new cases today. So, roughly a little less than 25% of all cases today are in Milwaukee County. 17.5% coming back positive. I feel like some of this data might be a little bit off. I'm going to talk through some of these localities where there were 2 counties that reported higher than 100% positive test rate, which means that they have at least some negative tests that didn't get counted in the data. Probably not enough that would really affect the statewide percentage significantly. It might have taken it from 11.2% down to 11.1% or something like that. But so take some of these localities with a tiny grain of salt. But again, Milwaukee County 17.5% is very high. Brown County today, 36 new cases, 42.35% positive test rate. That's really high. Dane County today, weirdly, Dane County is usually really low in the positive test rate. 66 new cases today, but 19.4% positive tests. Marinette County, 10 new cases, 40% positive. Outagamie County, 19 cases, 16.8% positive. Ozaukee County has 13 new cases and only reported 11 tests. So obviously that I'm not even going to tell you what their percentage might be. I'm just going to say it's not available because it's obviously wrong. Portage County, 10 new cases, 27.8% positive, which is pretty bad. Let's see. Washington County is another one that 52 new cases, but only 50 tests were run apparently. So we're just going to say that positive test rate not available. It's also possible that those 2 counties, Ozaukee and Washington counties, are reporting a couple of positive results from tests that took place earlier in the week. So that maybe there are only 50 tests today, and maybe 25 of those cases, just say 25% of those cases those tests were positive, but there's also 27 tests from earlier in the week that we're adding on today. So that's another reason that percentage might be off, but I'm still not going to report a positive test rate of over 100% because that's obviously incorrect. So I'm just going to say unavailable. Waukesha County, 64 new cases and 13.1% of those are positive, which is pretty high. A couple of other counties to mention where the percentage is a little bit lower. Calumet County, again on my list, 16 new cases there, but 5.8% positive, so better than the state average. Dodge County is 10 new cases and 6.5% positive. Jefferson County has 19 new cases and 9.3% positive. You hate it when 9.3% is actually a good number because it's lower than the state average because that's actually still pretty high. Racine County, same thing, 11 new cases and 8.9% positive, which should be a high number, but actually that's a low number today. Walworth County, same thing, 20 new cases, 9.9% positive. And then finally, Winnebago County, 17 new cases and 7.6% positive tests. Hospitalization data, again, not updated today. It did end up being updated. It looks like it was updated late yesterday, but it doesn't look correct. So I'm not going to speculate. I'm not going to try to feed you information that I'm not confident in. So we'll just wait until tomorrow to get an update on hospitalizations. The number of hospitalizations is not bad either way. It looks like it's maybe slightly higher than Friday, but not tremendously higher. And in either case, it's not even near to the point where Wisconsin hospitals are in danger of being overburdened. So that's why I'm comfortable just saying, we look at hospitalization as a measure of impact and how many people who are currently infected are seriously ill. but we're not looking at it as a, our hospital is going to be overrun, or can hospitals keep up with the capacity? Because so far they can. So far, the Wisconsin hospitals have the capacity to treat coronavirus cases. It hasn't been significantly overburdened. So that's why I'm comfortable. We want to keep an eye on it. We like to keep an eye on hospitalizations for other reasons, but I'm comfortable kind of letting that go for a couple of days to make sure that the numbers that I'm giving you are accurate. I'm happy to report that racial disparities are getting slightly better still. We're now down to Latino people make up 7% of the state's population, and they're down to 22% of total cases, which is still vastly disproportionate. You're still 3 times more likely to have tested positive if you're Latino than if you're non-Latino ethnicity, which is pretty bad. That was over 33% at one point. So the fact that we're saying it's down to 22% is pretty bad. But the fact is, it is down to 22%, which is good. 11.6% of today's cases were Latino people. Same thing for Black people. There's still 14% of all cases. That was over 20% at one point. And there's still 20% of deaths. That was almost 30% at one point. So again, both of those, Black people make up only 6% of the state's population. So both of those are very disproportionate, but they're less disproportionate than they were a couple months ago. The state is now reporting that they're saying 2% have died. I think it's a little bit less than that. It's more like 1.6% actually. They round up. 85% have recovered and 13% remain active. So you'll hear people say 99.5% people will survive this, and that's true. I think that the infection fatality rate will probably be less than 1% when all is said and done. When we look back at this 5 years from now, we will say that about a little bit less than 1% of people who were infected died. That doesn't mean we should just let it slide. It doesn't mean it's okay. It doesn't mean it's not a big deal, because the fact is 1.6-ish% of people who we have confirmed have died, and that means 1,038 people so far. For comparison, that's in the past 6 months, right? April, May, June, July, yeah, about 6 months. For comparison, in the 7 months of the most recent flu season, 165 people died of the flu. So it's not just the percentage that's important; it's the percentage of what number. When you have flu, you have like 17,000 flu cases, you have 165 deaths, and you have a similar percentage of deaths, but you have 65,000 cases, you're going to get 1,000 people died, right? So the fact is, it is even though it's a small percentage of people who get sick, who die, it's a large number of people who've gotten sick. Therefore, it's a large-ish number of people who've died. If there was anything else that did not exist 6 months ago and is now killing 7 people every day in our state and 1,000 people a day across the country, yeah, we would want to do something about that. Now, keeping in mind also that this is 1,038 people who have died, while for the most of that period of time, or a good portion of that period of time anyway, the state was more or less locked down. For about a month of that time, our major cities have required masks. School has not been in session. Universities have not been in session. All the sort of the vectors, the places where this thing is most likely to spread have not been really fully populated. And still, sorry if that my connection just hiccuped there a minute. And still, we have 1,038 deaths, even with all those measures in place. So imagine what would have happened if we'd not done those things, and imagine what will happen if we just forget it all and go back to normal. So that's my only pontification for today. One other statistic I'll mention is the rate of transmission, which is the average number of people who are infected by each infected person. Right now, that is 1.04 in Wisconsin. That is not catastrophic, but the fact that it's 1.04 today is bad news, because yesterday it was 1.02, and the day before that it was 0.97. We really need to get that number below 1. Because what that means is if it's at 1.0, that means each person who's sick will infect one other person on average, and it'll just keep spreading, but it won't spread faster. For every 100 people who have it, they'll pass it on to 100 other people, and then they'll pass it on to another 100 people, and now you have 300 people sick, right? But each round of infection is the same. If it's less than 1, each round of infection gets smaller. If it's more than 1, each round of infection gets bigger. So right now in Wisconsin, over the past 5 to 7 days, which is where this data comes from, every 100 people who've been sick have passed it on to 104 people. Right? So now you have 204 people who are sick. And then those 104 people will pass it on to another 106 people, roughly. 105, I guess. So now you have 300 and however many people sick. 307 people sick. So it's not ballooning. It's not like doubling every 3 days or anything like that. But each round of infection is getting bigger, and we're not reining it in. I am not an epidemiologist, so I don't know exactly when I say like we have to get it under 1. You say, Rob, how do you do that? I don't know. I don't know what to do differently. I guess, masks, stay home, that kind of stuff. It'll be interesting to see what happens when school starts. If most of Dane County and most of Milwaukee County is not really going to be in school, but the University of Wisconsin, I was on campus yesterday, and there are a lot of young people moving in, and we will see what happens. We will let you know what happens. That's our job, is to watch and see what happens and tell you about it. There is I don't see any questions in the comments, but Michelle makes a good point. When I talk about the death rate being 0.5% or 1.2% or whatever it ends up being, and that's a low number, it also when you say that 99.5% of people will survive it, that's true. However, a lot of those who survive, apparently, first of all, have just a miserable time when they're sick. Like it can be a very mild disease for some people. It can be a really, really miserable disease for other people. But also, it's looking more and more like some percentage, up to maybe like 20% of people who get sick have lasting organ damage. And it might have compromised lung function, compromised kidney function, compromised heart function. And it'll be hard to say, in 30 years from now, how many of those people died early, not directly from COVID, but because of the resulting heart damage or whatever. So it's a little bit facile and glib to say like, oh, it's fine. It's fine. Only 0.5% of people who get it die. Yeah, but 20% of people have permanent damage to their body. Is that okay with you? So, okay. That is all I have for you today. It's a beautiful Sunday. Even with bad news coming at you, I hope you're able to get out and enjoy some sunshine. It looks like it's going to be a nice day tomorrow as well. We have something really special for you tomorrow morning. I'm not going to let the cat out of the bag just yet, but tomorrow, first thing in the morning, you are going to want to visit Madison365.org. We have a very special project that we've been working on for a long time. It's going to launch tomorrow morning. That's all I'm going to say right now. 6 o'clock tomorrow morning, go to Madison365.org, and you will like what you see. Thank you for your attention, and thank you for joining me today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening, and we will see you again tomorrow.